So Rachel, tell me, how did this start? How did this start with this chap?
It started on an online dating platform. This guy liked me, I liked him, and we started chatting on New Year's Day this year.
And what was the first request for money?
Well, it was a few weeks down the line, about 3 weeks in. He'd travelled apparently from the UK to the Ukraine to work on an engineering contract. And he explained that due to COVID, laws had recently changed in that country, and as a foreign contractor, his taxes were due prior to commencement of works instead of the usual, which was mid-project or end project.
And how much was he asking for for?
At that point, he said that it was all budgeted for within the contract, and he didn't ask me for any tax money. He just said that all available funds that he did have would go towards paying a nominal amount towards the tax bill, and asked for a small amount from me of a couple of £100 for his taxes and his food.
So did you not right from the start question that?
Yes, I actually challenged him and said, are you a scammer? I'm not happy about this. I'm not doing it. I don't want to be involved. I mean, I did that throughout. I questioned him and I challenged him throughout. And it took me a long time each time to give him any money, and especially the first time.
So so eventually it came up to £113,000. How did you get that money?
So after the tax was sorted and work recommenced on site, so this was from around the 19th of January when work stopped up to the 8th of February when it restarted, he had borrowed some money from a local loan shark who he described as a vicious Russian gangster. And when this guy, he wanted to see him before he left the country, I got his flight details for the 28th of February, and he said, you can't leave until you pay me the £30,000 you owe me, plus the £15,000 interest. And of course, he didn't have that money. The money apparently that he'd used towards the tax bill. And this guy got his heavies and locked him up in a cellar. And I had pictures of him locked up supposedly in this cellar, where the guy said, you can have your phone to raise the money, and if you don't raise the money, I'm going to kill you. Your life is of no consequence to me. Saving face in the community is my priority, and you're not leaving this country without paying the money. So it is the money, or I'm going to kill you. This is what I was led to believe.
And by this stage, am I right in saying, did you feel that you were in love with this guy?
I think there was always a kind of from the beginning a possibility when we met that there might be something there. We had a lot of common interests, but that wasn't even relevant at this point. At this point now, all I wanted was him to come back to the UK and pay back everybody what he owed. But at the point where he was kidnapped, the priority was saving his life. That's what I believed. His life was in danger. So love and romance was something that may happen down the line, but it wasn't even a consideration.
So how did you actually send this money? By check? How did you actually transfer that money?
So by a few different means, some directly to Ukrainian bank accounts, some through a UK bank accounts, and some were cryptocurrency.
Oh my gosh. And where did you get all this money from? Did you just have it in your at your fingertips?
I had some money in savings, just under 20,000, and I borrowed the rest from loans and credit cards. And yes, it escalated from the initial point, but the money escalated, and it was bit by bit because of the dire circumstances he was in, and it was when his life was in danger that things escalated, and it was very serious.
When he said his life was in danger. Now,
when he said his life was in danger, yes.
Yeah. Now, when I know with my bank that when I go to transfer anything to anyone, I mean, even my doctor in England, if it's a new person or if it's over a certain amount, when you do it online, it asks you, do you know this person? It asks you a whole load of questions because it's a new person. Did you have anything like that when you transferred money?
There were warnings. I've never known that there were warnings, but you have to imagine that I know it's really difficult to understand, and I didn't know myself, but I was extremely vulnerable to these people, and they groomed me. So the initial thing was, he was a widower, he'd lost his wife to breast cancer, he brought his daughter up on his own, that had a traumatic time, very difficult. So these emotive connections, I felt sorry for him and his daughter, and this was part of the grooming. And I did believe him, although I challenged him, I was groomed. And I can't believe that a 50-year-old woman can be groomed in this way, but they are very, very sophisticated fraudsters. And that's why that was the start, and it escalated to this point where I was led to believe that his life was in my hands. And it was so traumatic for me.
Yeah, Rachel, I was going to say, you talked about you were vulnerable. Did he use elements of your past, maybe, or things you've gone through to pull you in?
No, I didn't really discuss with him my past. I knew about his past, but I didn't tell him about my history. It was never something I wanted to disclose. All I would say is the emotive connection was about his situation. I felt for him and his daughter, but there wasn't anything in my past that was relevant to that, and nothing that he could use because he didn't know anything about it. It was I was manipulated and groomed into feeling sorry for him and his daughter, and this is where things escalated from.
Did you borrow money borrowed money from banks, credit cards? Did family and friends say, whoa, just a minute?
Yes. My mum and my sister were involved from the beginning, and what you need to also know is that I had documents. I had the Ukrainian tax letter. I had a letter from his investors in the UK that I checked out on Companies House. They were worth 172 million. There were estates, property managers. This was all, I carried out checks throughout all of this. So I had documents. Obviously now I know they were all forgeries, but I had documentation, I had photographs. He was begging and pleading for his life. His daughter was begging me to help save her dad's life. So there was a lot of emotional connections there, but I did have documents and photographs as well, and I did check them.
So when was it? So when was the time? I believe he said finally he could come back to the UK. You went to the airport, did you, to meet him?
I went to the airport to meet him on the 16th of March. And at this point, all I was concerned about was getting him back to England safe, in one piece, away from these criminals. He didn't come, and I had a ransom demand from supposed Ukrainian airport officials saying that he'd helped an elderly gentleman with luggage that had drugs in. They knew he was innocent, but they wanted money to release him because I guess they thought he was coming from quite an affluent country and he would have money. Why would he be in the Ukraine working if not?
Wow.
And at this point I said, you're on your own. You've ruined everything. You're on your own.
So had you actually ever met him in person?
No.
Never throughout this.
No.
So were you warned at the airport? Did anybody say anything at the airport when you were waiting?
While I was waiting for the flight, I went to Border Forces, who looked at the email, and they said it looks like a scam. They didn't know the history of what had happened, and they just said he'll be on the plane, and consequently he wasn't on the plane. But they weren't aware of the history. I didn't have time to explain to them what had happened, but I panicked when I was at the airport because I didn't know what else to do. And I've been through so much. I was in so much trauma all the time. I just couldn't really cope anymore.
Yeah. So now you're 100, am I right, 113,000?
Just under 113,000, yes. And obviously some of that was my savings.
So what are you going to do?
So what's happened is, on the police advice, I contacted my two banks who process payments on my behalf. I contacted Step Change, the debt consolidation charity, and I contacted my creditors. I've told them all exactly what's happened. I was quite shocked when the police said to me, you are a victim of crime. You've been groomed and manipulated. It's because you're a good person. This is why you're in this situation. We have doctors and lawyers and different level of people. It's not due to stupidity, it is due to being groomed by very, very clever, sophisticated criminals who are trained in the art of getting as much money out of people as they can. So I told my banks, and there's a model that was set up 2 years ago called the contingent reimbursement model, and 8 banks signed up to it. My bank, Santander and HSB, signed up to it, and it's twofold. part of it is that they will make sure that their security is great and ever evolving with cybercrime. And secondly, that when they recognise victims of crime and fraud, they will reimburse those victims. So if you think it's kind of like an insurance policy, they sign up to this contingent reimbursement, I guess there's some kind of subscription, and when they reimburse victims of fraud, they get that money back. And it was these payments are non-reversible.
Are you going to get that money back?
Both my banks have declined, and yet this was set up with declined to be the exception. And unfortunately, the banks that are signed up to the code, the reimbursements are between 1% and 45%. So it's actually going for a parliamentary review in September because it's not performing. And the Financial Ombudsman has done a report on this as of October 2020 to find significant failings of the code, and so of which have commented in June that the code is failing because it's for victims of crime. And if you are burgled, the police don't ask where your CCTV is. If you're mugged, they don't ask you, did you fight the perpetrator? And yet when you're a victim of fraud, you are sometimes treated as the criminal. And I feel
Rachel,
like my banks have done that.
Rachel, just quickly, because we've got to end this, what has this done to you? Because I'm sure you've got most people, and I know when your story was in the press, people are like basically saying you're a mug, you're, you know, all of those things. I'm sure you've read that. But what has this done? What is it doing to Rachel, the person?
It has made me feel suicidal, and apparently suicide is a high instance for victims of this. Luckily, I have really, really strong support from my mum, my sister, and some outstanding friends who've been there for me, kept me off the ledge. I'm under my doctor, I'm on antidepressants, and I'm struggling. There's no denying that, but I'm still fighting. And at the moment, I'm waiting for the Ombudsman to conduct a impartial review of the bank's decisions.
All right.